listening to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast. It was a huge win for Arsenal. 12 points from Newcastle away, West Ham at home, Fulham away and Crystal Palace at home. They were games that we picked up a total of 2 points last season. This year we have 12 points and we look like a very, very different team. Forget excuses. Mikel Arteta's team has all the answers this year. We are very much a side on the way to something very, very special. And that's becoming more and more abundantly clear. Today, we came into the game with Gabriel Doubt. He turned out to give an absolute colossus of a performance at the back. And Eberechi Eze stepped up and got the most inevitable goal he will ever score. But let's start off with looking at Eze's performance because he got the goal that ultimately decided the game. And what a goal it was. You look at his position. This is very similar to a chance he had midweek against Atletico. We talk about Mikel Arteta curating attacks, building everything on the training ground. Midweek, we saw Eze go in, almost a scissor kick type volley, and a very similar one today. The one midweek landed at Gyokeres' feet, funny enough, in a very similar position to where Victor Gyokeres is here. This time, no doubt about it, straight into the bottom corner. It was as beautiful of a finish as you will see in an Arsenal shirt. Absolutely first class. And it was one of those where we needed a goal. Up to this point, the game had been very, very stale. And it was one where Arsenal were sloppy, but very, very heavily dominant in possession. But we needed a moment of magic. Crystal Palace, I want to start with, they were absolutely sensational today. They're probably the best drilled team I've seen at the Emirates for a long, long time. The way Glasner has them set up in that 3-4-3 that drops into a 5 whenever they lose the ball, absolutely top class. They're incredibly difficult to break down. And if you look at that mid-block structure, the distances between their players, it is so rigid and they're very, very good at cutting out the passing lanes. They are good at mapping them. They knew where Arsenal would want to play it and they were great at intercepting the ball. So at times, it looked like Saliba and Zubimendi were making sloppy passes. Same with Declan Rice. But actually, what you were seeing was Palace mapping out the lanes where Arsenal wanted to play that ball. As a result, Palace were able to just step in, win the ball and make sure that we weren't able to play the game we wanted to. That's what made it so rigid and almost so stale that for the neutral, this would have been an absolute horrible watch. But for Arsenal fans, for Palace fans would have been delighted in that first half up to the goal. But at the same time, you look at moments in the game, Mateta really gives Saliba the run around at times in that first half. On one occasion, Saliba goes back, Calafiori Timber comes in very well, intercepts, and then makes a complete mess of his kind of pass away, whatever you call it, and the ball comes back into the box. But overall, this was a game that we controlled. Last 20 minutes, Palace really came into it, but Arsenal could have scored more. We could have had moments in the game where we took more advantage. You look at the first 5 minutes of the second half, in particular, Mascara comes on, header off the bar, Rice's shot saved on the line by Dean Henderson. That moment of play, Saka's shot that just goes around the post. These moments are moments that you have to take to go 2-0 up. And it felt like if we went 2-0 up because of how rigid Palace were set up, we could have saw that game out quite easily. Instead, we had to hang on a bit. But David Raya never really had to make a big save. At no point in that game did you think that we were under pressure. We are so difficult to play against. Teams really lack belief when they come forward. At one point, Eddie Nketiah's touch, he was in good first touch and he's got a shot away at goal. Instead, he overthinks that ball, goes straight out of play. These are moments that our defense are actually getting into the heads of teams. It's a big problem for teams playing against us because they're beaten in the tunnel. And the minute we went 1-0 up in this game, it felt like we were going to win it. And against a team like Palace, who have beaten Liverpool already this season, that's a very big feat. At no point did they look like they were really able to put the pressure on us. And you look at that team, they're very good players in there. Lacroix and Guehi at the back, both very, very composed on the ball, very good centre-backs. You go into midfield, you see Adam Morton in there. Excellent player. Very, very good passer. I didn't think we made him run enough today. He's a player that doesn't like tackling, and I didn't think we gave him the run around and moved it around quick enough. But when you look at the players that we had in there and you look at how rigid their structure was, it was very difficult to play through. And I want to go back to Eze because he was a player that we bought for situations like this. And I want to firstly praise him for the goal, which I've already done. It was an incredible goal and it came at a big, big moment. And it almost felt there was an inevitability that he would score in this game. He had talked up his love of Palace before the game. He even said that he was willing to go to Spurs. However, the minute Arsenal came in, it was only ever Arsenal. So let's look at some of the instances that I want to see Eze do more of. So first up, let's look at his heat map. You can see it's very congested in and around that right 8 position. This is something that Eze didn't do at Palace last season. He was someone that started primarily out on the left and veered into the centre. So whilst everyone profiled him as a 10, he was more of a almost like a false winger, or as some people would call it, a wing fielder. That player that starts very, very wide, but glides infield and has the majority of their touches actually infield in that half space. And that's what Eze was doing last year. You look at him today, and he didn't create any chances. He was getting the ball in that right 8 space. This is very much where Odegaard plays. And to me, feels like we're getting him to stick a bit too much to Odegaard's position, but he's not coming deep. He's not having the touches or the kind of involvement in a game that Odegaard is, nor is he having the press and intensity that Odegaard does. But I said at the time when we bought Eze, you don't buy a player like Eze to make him adapt to what you do. Yes, that will happen. He will get more familiar with his teammates, the system, and how Arsenal play. But ultimately, I feel that we need to get more out of him. We need to use him the way he plays. But right now, with Odegaard out, he's having to do a job that he probably won't have to do in a few months. And instead, Trossard's doing the role that we probably bought Eze to do. But let's have a look at his touch map, because that's something that is equally interesting. And one, because he didn't create any chances today. But what about his touches? So he had 29 successful touches. Given the volume of possession that we had today, that's not a huge number of touches, 45 in total. I want to see him get more involved on the ball. So first half, he wasn't as involved as I would have liked. He had moments where I thought he was almost, especially in the first 20 minutes, I thought he was playing a bit too lackadaisical. He had a calmness that almost the game didn't require. We know that Eze doesn't panic. We know that he's super calm in and around the box, but there's times in the build-up that we want to see him a bit more switched on. And after the goal, it really felt like that happened. You can see where his touches are. Again, it backs up the heat map. They're all in and around that right 8 position. But the concern here is not enough of them are getting close to the box. You see, the only touch he had in the box today was for his goal. And then the other one, the next highest touch up the park, was right at the edge of the box in that left 8 position, that left half space, exactly where you would see as in most in a Palace shirt. But in an Arsenal shirt, where we're seeing most of his touches are in that right 8 position. One lovely piece of play he had, got the ball first time and just spun that ball out to the wing, kept going and advancing into the box. They're the kind of touches, those first time, those instinctive pieces of play. That's what we know he can do. And that's where he can rip a game wide open, especially with a really rigid mid-block the way Palace played. Because that system today completely took Bukayo Saka out of the game. It made life very, very difficult for Victor Gyokeres, who I thought had another good game, but he didn't have a shot. He didn't get anything away. He was feeding on scraps today, but he allowed us to stretch them. He allowed us to move them around. But ultimately, last 10, 15 minutes of the game, I thought he looked absolutely exhausted again. And this is where we really need to be getting Kai Havertz back into the team, because we don't have a player that can rotate with Gyokeres. And with Declan Rice going off injured, it meant that Mourinho had to come on for Rice. And that was, again, a substitution that probably would have been made for Gyokeres. But it meant keeping him on the pitch a bit longer. But with Eze, I want to see him getting the ball a bit more in between the lines. I want to see him getting them into these areas, but in more high frequency. And the other thing I would add is I think Eze can be a player in these scenarios when the team's really rigid and they're not coming towards you, they're just making you play through them. I think Eze, rather than taking a touch and giving it off first time, he can take 3 or 4 touches, let players come to him, because he's very good at standing with the ball at his feet, letting players advance towards him, and then moving away, gliding into the middle of that park. And that really unsettles teams, because they don't know when to jump out, when to come at him, or when to let him stand. And at the minute, it feels like he's taking a touch, looking up, and when he doesn't see someone, he's popping it off. Sometimes I think Eze just needs to trust his carrying ability. That's one of the big factors that we bought him for. In these mid-blocks, a player that can run through the middle of the park, draw players towards them, and really, really give them trouble. We saw it on a couple of occasions, but not enough. And ultimately, not a lot came from those. But what did happen was Palace looked a bit more ruffled. The minute a player starts running through the middle of the park, especially one with the close, tight control of Eberechi Eze, you are going to unsettle. And that's inevitable. That happens with every team because players get drawn towards the carrier, they get drawn towards the ball, and it creates space for other people. On today, we had some players that didn't quite look sharp. Bukayo Saka didn't look himself. And in the first half, I thought Saliba looked very, very poor. There was almost a nonchalance that he's talked about before. That complacency, give the ball away on a couple of occasions quite softly. There's the straight ball down the middle that led from us attacking. Next minute, Palace had the ball straight down the other end. He gets goal side of Mateta. Somehow Mateta gets a foot in there, manages to win it. Timber had to clear up for him. And there was another occasion when Gabriel had to come in and sweep up for him. These are usually Saliba's bread and butter. And it didn't quite happen for him today. But again, he comes off at halftime. And there is probably something there. Who knows what it was? Hopefully it's nothing and he's back very, very quickly. We've got Brighton midweek, and it's the same with Declan Rice. Same with Gabriel, who took a big, big hit to his plums off the post. That did not look nice. That did not make for good watching. But again, it showed how committed this guy is to the cause. He was a colossus today, as I said, absolutely sensational. He dealt incredibly well with Mateta. It's one of the quietest I've seen Mateta in a game. And you look at that Palace front three. Pino went off on 60 minutes for Nketiah because he just couldn't impact the game. Sarr, again, is a player that's caused us trouble in the past, couldn't impact the game at all. And that was because of our defensive unit. Calafiori on the left, absolutely superb, getting up and down the pitch, but realized that the game actually required him to stay in a more structured piece of play today. Him roaming wasn't quite what the game required. And that meant that he had to just be more disciplined. As a result, we saw Calafiori impact the game probably across all three thirds, but not in the final third in the extent that we have seen him in the past. Inside, Mosquera, again, when he came on in the second half, I thought he was brilliant. His composure on the ball's first class. His ability to cover big spaces is top class. And his aerial ability is improving very quickly. Very unlucky not to get a goal today, and that goal would have killed it if that went in. But as I said, this game feels like a massive, massive win. It's a weekend where all our rivals have lost, and we are once again sitting cushy at the top of the table. And the thing is, we just have to keep winning games. We don't have to worry about those around us. If Arsenal keep winning games, that's all that matters. The last thing we want this season is to be chasing a big lead. We've been there before. You're relying on someone else slipping up. And if they don't, which we've seen previously doesn't always happen, suddenly it doesn't matter what you do. You can win 17 out of 18 games and you don't win the title. So what we want to do now is build as much pressure and as many points as possible to ensure that we keep growing and keep pressuring on and make sure we're creating a lead now before the games come thick and fast in the second half of the season. But at right back today, Gyokeres and Timber, brilliant again. There were a couple of moments in the first half where I thought that he looked a bit leggy, but at the same time, there were other moments where he turned and spun and got away from men. At one point around 30, 40 minutes, he got the ball and he twisted and turned around three men, ended up winning a free kick. But again, it showed just how good he is and how malleable he is to whatever area he is on the pitch. And again, second half, when he needed to defend, just brilliant, really, really strong, really solid, and just a really reliable player. And in front of him, Martin Zubimendi, another really super reliable player. At times today in the first half, I thought he looked a bit sloppy, but actually, the more I look into it, the more I think actually Palace's structure was so brilliant today that it did map out the passing lanes and allow them to shut them out. And it meant that we needed Palace to come at us. We needed to lose the ball at times. We needed to assert our dominance out of possession because in possession, they had such a rigid block that they were asking us to play around it. Or if we dared play through it, but they were so drilled and so aggressive in their interceptions. Whenever we did try to play through them, they were cutting us out. They weren't letting us go forward. And next minute, they were springing us on the counter. And in the second half, when the game freed up a bit more, Zubimendi was one of those that really, really settled into the game. He looked very, very good. And he was someone that really helped keep the ball moving and keep us going forward. But alongside him, Declan Rice, for me, was the best player in the second half. Absolute monstrous performance on numerous occasions, got back, cut the ball out, and got Arsenal moving forward. his ability to carry today was shown in abundance, the way he could move that ball forward. However, his passing range today, he actually finished with quite a low passing percentage in comparison to what we've seen recently, finishing with just 73% accurate passing. That's very low for Declan, and it's not something that we've seen recently, but this was the nature of the game. This was very, very disciplined, very structured. There wasn't much space. And as I said, you almost needed to lose the ball to assert your dominance, because it was about winning it back and winning it back effectively. Ahead of them, I have talked a lot about Eberechi Eze already. I feel that there's more he can do, but I'm hoping this goal is a big, big moment in his Arsenal career. It felt like he needed to do something, and this was a match-winning goal against his former club. On the right, Saka didn't look right today. There was something off. He was reportedly not in any pictures or anything coming into the game, something that I didn't read too much into, but he didn't quite look himself today. Part of that may have been structure with Guehi and Mitchell marking him. It's very, very difficult to get in around them, especially when you've got such a rigid structure to play against. And Gyokeres, again, I've mentioned. But on the left, I thought Leo Trossard was one of the best players on the pitch. His ability to protect the ball, win it, move away from a defender, get his back in the way, and make sure that ball's protected is absolutely first class. He uses it so well. His decision-making in the final third today was excellent. And it was one of those games where I thought if he had an overlapping fullback, or Calafiori just had that bit more kind of pace to get out and around him, we could have done a lot more damage. But ultimately, a big reason why we didn't was because of the Palace block. We did create some chances today. They were hardly chances in abundance. But ultimately, this was a game that I look at and I just think it was about getting a result. This run of games has been about getting a result. And you look at the XG in today's game, Arsenal 1.08 compared to Palace's 0.47. Arsenal one big chance with a total of 7 shots or 10 shots, sorry. It wasn't a game for the neutral. This was a game that was very, very tight, very tense, and this was the kind of game that we would have dropped points in last season. So what I'm going to finish with is my headline for today. Arsenal don't need excuses. We've got solutions, and Mikel Arteta is using them every week. So please tell me, what do you think? Are Arsenal the best team in the league right now? Do we have the solutions? Are you worried about the fact that we do sit 17th for open play goals? Or do you think that this set piece stuff that's getting us 3 games right now is completely sustainable, given that it's not just a case of one player nodding the ball into the back of the net? We're seeing an array of goal scorers, and we're seeing a very, very different number of goals scored from set pieces. But give me your thoughts. I'm very open to this discussion. Very, very interested in having a conversation. So drop a comment. Tell me what you think. Please hit the like button, as it really helps with the algorithm. And of course, please subscribe to the channel. Thank you for listening. Have a great day, and we will see you again for a more in-depth episode very soon. Thank you.
You're now listening to the Arsenal Therapy Podcast.